I mean,
Yeah.
I think in the last couple of years, more than in the 40 years that I practiced before that.
Well, hold that thought. Actually, we'll start with that. So, because
Okay.
I want to ask, because you've seen the progression of it.
Yeah.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining this episode of the podcast. We got a great guest today, a legend in the immigration field called Shusterman.
Old.
And actually, we'll just jump to where we were talking about before we started recording, just about the progression of immigration law. So, how have you seen it? I mean, you've been doing this for since the 80s or
70s,
late 70s, or
yeah.
70s. How has been the progression you've seen what we're dealing with now?
Yeah, I mean, in the earlier years, I mean, it's hard to imagine and look back now,
Yeah.
but Ronald Reagan, conservative governor from California, had an amnesty, legalized millions of people.
Yeah.
George Bush, after him, almost tripled the number of employment-based immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't so much a partisan thing. I mean, sometimes the Democratic senators and congressmen were my friends, and sometimes it was the Republicans that were my friends. But it wasn't this deep divide that we're seeing now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very troublesome now. I think, I mean, of course, immigrants can't vote, and the voters, there's opioid crisis. There's people that their jobs have been shipped overseas because it's cheaper. And it's great for a politician to use that as a strategy and say, blame the other. It's these Mexicans, it's the Muslims, But, I haven't seen that the, steel companies and the rubber companies and the auto companies are going to move their business back to the U.S.
Yeah.
No matter who he demonizes. But it won him the election in 2016, and it's just a time. I'm listening to a book about this now. I am listening to a book. It's about the 1924 immigration law.
Oh, interesting.
And at that time, instead of demonizing Mexicans and Muslims, it was Italian Catholics and Eastern European Jews, and they were the bad guys. And of course, they couldn't vote and help Calvin Coolidge and all these people win elections. So it's not something new, but it's before my time.
Yeah, it's going to follow us. I think in the future, it's just always there's an out group, and it's the easy one. Like the immigrants, when they do eventually naturalize, from what I see my clients, they're so burned out from the immigration process that they don't want to think about it, to vote like pro, or they just like, I don't want to even think about immigration because I have to go through this horrible system. It costs me so much money to just be able to live here peacefully. They seem like just over it by that point.
Well, true, but the way our system's set up, if they want to get their brothers, sisters, parents, family members, they really have to become citizens.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that our president, at least a couple of years ago, he pledged to.
Yeah, that's his current personal policy.
Cut immigration by half.
Yeah.
But the latest thing, a few weeks ago, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, wrote this thing, and he said, no, we won't cut immigration at all. We'll just give most of those family category people to employment, which I have to admit, I think it is a smarter policy.
Yeah.
But so you don't know exactly where he is. He doesn't know exactly where he is.
It seems like the F4, the sibling category, might go away. They were talking about spouses of green card holders not be able to get it F2A, which is kind of extreme for
that would be very extreme.
Adult children. Okay, adult children of green card holders, maybe citizens, maybe not. But spouses of green card holders is kind of extreme to get rid of. One main thing I have is just making the time for a U.S. citizen spouse to come here, like the K3 category, make that really fast. Like if you're a U.S. citizen to get married, it shouldn't take more than a month or two to get them here. These stretched out periods of time where spouses are separated, it's really just ruins relationships. Sometimes couples are pregnant or they want to have kids, they have to wait, and sometimes older it's harder. There's certain category things that I think like they really should just speed up. I mean, we could go down the list. We'll probably talk about the stuff, but it's interesting. I want to get an F4, and a lot of people are like, well, if you're a U.S. citizen, file for your sibling now as soon as possible if this goes away. But one way they worded it was that even the ones that had filed their I-130s, they might lose their place in line and just get a couple points. And I'm not sure legally if they're probably going to sue in federal court against that because you paid the money for the filing fee. All you get is some points for the new point system. They're going to be a lot of pushback and lawsuits against that. So It's like the wild, wild west right now in immigration. You don't know what's going to happen.
It is, although I'm always the glass half full guy.
Yeah.
So in a couple weeks from now, the 2A category, the spouses and kids of permanent residents, will be current for the first time, I think, in my life.
Yeah, it's one of the shocking things. Like, one of the most shocking was when the employment-based category became current for EB2s, like a couple years back too. It came current again after being backed up. These little things pop up, these gems.
Yeah, and we're finding other things too. I mean, last summer when Jeff Sessions, who was the Attorney General, came out with this policy where immigration judges had to complete 700 cases a year, which is about 3 a day if you look at work days. And I've had more of my attorneys become judges than I think anybody in the country. We're up to 6 of them.
Wow.
And it's just crazy. I mean, they're supposed to be judges and deciding, are you going to get asylum? Are you going to be killed if you go?
Deal stuff, yeah.
All of a sudden, you got to get through 3 of those cases a day. I mean, how can you really do a good job?
Yeah.
But I had a case last month in Chicago and one in San Francisco, one with an Obama-appointed judge, another one with a Trump-appointed judge. And I was so surprised. They both got approved. It was like cases that in their old lawyers had gone on 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
They came to me thinking, like I could do something magic. And I said, no, we have to do it the regular way.
Yeah.
And they both got approved in about a half an hour.
Wow.
And I think it was 2 things. I think I'll take a little credit. Our staff really prepared. We had expert witnesses. We had a lot of materials. But on the other hand, the judges, I think, looked at it and said, oh my God, like how can I complete this case fast? And they both won their cases in a half hour. My expert witnesses did not have to go on the stand. And I think the judges, they come in and they look at their monitor and it says, you've completed 150 out of 700 cases.
Yeah.
You have this many more to go. And they're thinking, how can I wrap up this case really fast? So the thing that I hated so much actually turned out to be my clients to their advantage. Yeah.
I think a lot of their policies has the opposite effect of what they're doing. Like all the talk about a border wall is causing more people to just run in before the wall comes up. Just internal policies is causing USCIS employees to get fed up, State Department to get fed up with the nonsense and just do their own thing. There's like a semi-mutiny kind of going aboard because let's say even their pro-Trump and the policies and immigration policies just technically, practically, like what they're trying to do doesn't make any sense. The stuff in 700 cases, a judge is going to drive them crazy. It's like you're hurting your own employees. And then they got rid of the old the new USCIS head was a good technocrat system. I was surprised they got rid of him. The next guy, Cuccinelli, I mean, he's not an immigration attorney, not a former USCIS officer. It's kind of, underlings will get frustrated with this kind of stuff. And it is internally USCIS, I've heard that they're frustrated too. I'm head of the union went and said, legal immigration is over, they're destroying the system, and they're just putting that out. It's a scary time, even if, there's got to always be legal immigration, no matter how much anti-immigrant you are. It's just people got to move around. That's just the nature of society since its beginning. So to come so hard-lined against it and just a big brush, it's a scary time. So, you went through amnesty. Let's go back to the beginning to people that might not know you, I doubt it, but how did you get started in the business?
My dad was an IRS agent, okay, and we lived in the San Fernando Valley, and he was in a carpool with a guy who was the chief immigration judge. And I had a couple of jobs out of law school in urban transportation of all things.
Yeah.
And one of the jobs was kind of going downhill, and they put us on 4 days a week. And my dad said, hey, come on down to the federal building. And he's pushing all the, there's 8 floors down there. And I'm interviewing with all these agencies that I have no interest in at all in working for. And then he pushes the 8th floor, and I said, Dad, that's the immigration service. I knew, some of the anti-immigration policies that had been, instituted.
Yeah.
I said, I don't want to work for the immigration service. And he goes, take this from your dad. When you get a job in the federal government, then you're in, and if you want to transfer to another agency, it'll be easy.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe he knows something, my dad, So I didn't get the job right away, but in 1976, because of a presidential election, but basically Gerald Ford wanted to carry Florida, and there were a lot of Cubans who were green card holders, and they hated communism and you know, because of Castro and so on. So they tended to vote Republican, and he wanted to get as many naturalized as possible, but they couldn't be so obvious and just hire more naturalization attorneys in Florida. So they increased the amount in LA from 6 to 18, and I was one of the 12 that signed up. And I worked for the agency for 6 years, did naturalization, derivative citizenship, and then eventually got promoted to become a prosecutor, a trial attorney. And I must say, you know, I think that was like the best preparation I could have had for private practice, because I think I would have been very intimidated, like suing the government in federal court and so on. But as a trial attorney, I'd have to go and kind of whisper in the assistant U.S. attorney's ear in federal court, like at least once or twice a week. And, you know, I realized that these people weren't, you know, they weren't Harvard Law School, you know, law review grads or anything like that. And when I came out, we did a lot of federal litigation. In fact, we just won a mandamus suit for some doctor who works in an underserved area, and he's been stuck in Pakistan for months, and they're doing background checks. Even though when he first came to the U.S., they kept him there for 18 months doing background checks. So I mean, it sort of doesn't make sense. But for me, it was really good preparation, because I thought, okay, you know, if the government doesn't do what they're supposed to do under the law, we can go in and file a petition for writ of mandamus, and we do that dozens of times and have yet to lose one of those.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good points. One is, especially for newer lawyers, law students, like immigration is one of the things you fall into a lot of the time, but you fall in love with it. You're like, what a great field. That was the same for me.
It is.
and also the importance of not being afraid to file these lawsuits. I mean, it's a system that's designed to do lawsuits. It's perfectly legal. That's designed to be that way. And I found hesitation in the past of recommending that clients because I was afraid, and I think my fear might have seeped into the clients too. But be very comfortable. I mean, this is just a system that's there when they're taking 18 months for a background check. It shouldn't take that long. I mean, if it takes 18 months to do a background check on a person, that means their whole security apparatus, which you spend trillions of dollars for, has failed. It takes them that long to figure out what's going on with them. So it's a necessity. I'm glad you were able to do that, because people's lives are just on hold when they're waiting for these decisions. It's horrible. And so. A quick question for myself. What part of the valley did you grow up in?
I was right by Roscoe Boulevard. I mean, it was like the first street, the first northern street. It was called Burton Street in North Hollywood. Right across Roscoe was Sun Valley. And I went to Polytechnic High School, which was kind of a gang school. But even then, there were different immigrant groups that you know that there. A lot of our school was Hispanic. A lot of our school was Asian, which was sort of unusual then. There was a big Japanese American community, and you know there were kids that were in my academic classes, you know, from all these backgrounds and stuff. And I thought I was really influenced by a lot of them, and didn't realize it so much until I became an immigration lawyer, and then got in touch with my old friends and realized that their families had to go through this system, and I was just this white guy, you know, born in Los Angeles of parents that were born in the U.S. So it wasn't something I really thought about that much.
So I was born here, and like until I became immigration lawyer, it didn't hit me. And my parents, I remember, they had to leave the U.S. when I was a kid and go do consular processing in Vancouver. And we all went there, U.S. Embassy, and I remember playing there and stuff. But the reality of what happened, until I started practicing a couple of years, I had a flashback, and I realized, they were consular processing. They had to go out, it was in the mid-90s, go outside and do employment-based EV category, something, come back. But then all the things just came together, and I asked them, like, that's what we're doing. But when you're born here, you don't realize you have to get a social security number and a work permit, and like, that's just a given. You don't appreciate just how insanely difficult it is to get in the process. And I grew up in the Valley too, and I was in the 90s, all around Venture Boulevard, from Studio City, Sherman Oaks, Woodland Hills, Tarzan. We moved around a lot. And it's completely changed as it is now. I can only imagine from when you were there too. I mean, there's big orchards of orange trees everywhere back in the day.
Exactly.
Now it's like, Pierce College used to have a big farm. I mean, like fruit trees everywhere we go and plucked when we were kids and stuff. Now they mowed it down and it's just like grass lot. It's kind of sad that it's got that. Oh, sorry, turn my phone. That it's like changed so drastically. So one thing is when you started, INS included both the courts, the ICE, and USCIS.
Exactly.
And it changed. I mean, it changed after 9/11 and stuff. But did you like that system better, where it was all in-house, or what is your opinion on the change?
Well, I mean, in a way, there should be some. There should be some separation between the judges and the trial attorneys. It's probably better that they're in separate agencies. But I don't know. I mean, it's not exactly what people think. I remember when I was a trial attorney, and I'm sure a lot of people on the outside of this whole immigration thing think that attorneys are sitting down there and writing the charges against people when they go to court. But it really isn't. It's a bunch of investigators with no legal background who are writing those things, and it still is even today. So I would actually go down and talk to the investigators when we'd get a case approved or they would appeal or whatever, just to keep them informed. But I noticed there was almost no communication between the trial attorneys and the investigators.
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird bureaucracy, and I don't usually go to immigration, but I was there last Friday. I took a case to the 6th floor there. It was a 751 case to go from a 2-year to a 10-year green card.
How long did it take to get to the interview for that one?
Well, he just came to me. His lawyer did a great job. They were doubting the validity of the marriage, and they submitted 550 pages of evidence. And then he got rid of the attorney and hired me. And I don't usually go to immigration, but all of my attorneys had hearings that day. So it turned out to be a good experience for me. But the examiner sat there and asked him questions that were in those 550 pages, because I had really reviewed that a lot, and I could tell she hadn't, So sometimes, when they're trying to get this system moving like a freight train or something, they don't have the time to sit there and read. So now she gave herself 120 days to read it and then get back to us again.
I was talking to some people, adjudicators in USCIS, and they said we're so slammed that we don't have time to read it, and if we put it to the side, it's just going to get dust on it because it's just too much coming in. I mean, they just had a notice that came from USCIS this morning that said they're trying to speed up naturalization and adjustment of status, so they're going to start moving around you to a different field office. It's just kind of going to be annoying if someone's supposed to be scheduled in Los Angeles, but they send them to San Bernardino, which is like a trek out. But I mean, for the clients, obviously it's good. But it's a big hassle all of a sudden. I've had to drive to Orange County and stuff like that. And actually, one news is I've heard they're separating Orange County and San Bernardino, making that part of San Diego's field office potentially.
Right, we were both at that meeting.
Right? So that's going to be interesting, and we have our people we know at LA. We know the system. If it's San Diego's the headquarters and that's their district, that's going to be different. I've heard the courts there that are more conservative and strict in San Diego. LA district, there's goods and bads overall, but probably the devil is better than the devil you don't. I'm like, oh no, don't bifurcate these guys, just keep it as it is. But LA is so big, it kind of makes sense. So what made you switch from working for the government to go into private practice?
Oh, I think I knew from day one that my when I started thinking about it, I just had these kind of ignorant views, like I think a lot of people do, because they're not in that system. I thought immigration law, like, I know. When I was at UCLA Law School, and I was an assistant to this professor. His name was Gary Schwartz, and he did urban transportation. That's why my first couple of jobs were there. And I would walk to his office. He gave me the key, and I'd be able to study there instead of studying with hundreds of people in the library. And a guy from very near your office here in West LA named Ron Bonaparte, he was a private attorney, but he would teach this evening immigration class at UCLA. And it was right near Gary's office, and I'd walk there and I'd see him there with like 10 students, and he'd be talking about, 245 or what. I didn't know what he was talking about. And I thought, what does an immigration lawyer do anyway? I mean, would I stand on the border with Mexico and as people are running over, throw my business cards in the air and hope somebody catches
it? That's actually what the population, when I ever talk to people about immigration attorney, that's what they think I do.
And I should have been smarter, because my girlfriend at UCLA for like 6 years, and we're still good friends, was born in China, and her had a whole her dad had a complicated immigration history and stuff. But it didn't really resonate that much with me.
It's not something you look for, unless you're doing it.
So I was just thinking, Mexico.
Yeah.
And, I would say these days, maybe my clients from Mexico, maybe 10% of my practice.
Yeah.
But, the other people are mostly from Asian countries. I would say India, China, Philippines, Iran, Middle East, Middle Eastern countries. But it's pretty diversified and spread out, and I love listening to their stories and sometimes the messes that I said Mexico's just a small part, but I got an email yesterday from Gio, this young woman who contacted me 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe 6 or 7 years ago. She was in Mexico. She had come here when she was 3 years old. She was so she was undocumented, but it wasn't her fault. Her parents brought her. She would have been a DACA kid these days, But she marries her boyfriend. They hire somebody who sends her down to Ciudad Juarez after.
I don't like where this is going.
And it turned out that somebody in the family died, and her father brought them to Mexico when she was 9 and then back again. And they started questioning her, and she wasn't prepared for this at all. And she just made a couple of guesses in her answer because they seemed very hostile. And at the end of it, they said, "You stay down here for 10 years and then you'll be able." They thought she was under the permanent bar. And then she's down there in a suburb of Mexico City and going to an internet cafe, and she stumbles on my website, and she finds out exactly what the permanent bar is, and she orders all the papers, and it turns out she came back right before the 96 law went into effect. But they asked her, "Were you 9 or 10?" And she was like, "God, I don't remember, 10." But she was actually 9. So I got in touch with the head of immigrant visas in Juarez, and we got the waiver approved, for the 10-year bar, and we got her back. And I don't know, we just became so close that I have it on my webpage. I had her husband, and her little kid, which she had in Mexico. She didn't even know she was pregnant until she got refused down there, over at our house for the weekend. They just stayed with us. We really bonded. And now she said, now 5 years have gone by, and I want you to do my citizenship. She goes, when I think of going back inside the immigration service, I feel like vomiting. That's what she said. And, she doesn't have much to be worried about. Everything's taken care of. But, I try to put myself in her place and think, oh my God, if you weren't born here, you might be going through something terrible like this. And every day, when I'm at work, I have about 6 people who come in for consultations or Skype consultations. And I listen to their stories, and I think, my God, every one of these, it could be a novel. Or really, really interesting. And, and I want to tell people who, I understand a lot of, LA is pretty homogenized with lots of, people from different countries. But if you live in maybe, Mississippi or North Dakota, maybe you don't see it that much, and you hear somebody speaking another language and you get kind of shaken up. But the immigrants have contributed so much. California is the world's 6th largest economy. Never would have happened without immigrants. The guy who invented Yahoo, Sergey Brin from Google, Steve Jobs' dad was from Syria, you know, for Apple.
He'd be travel ban. He would never.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I understand, you know, it's a little like you hear people speaking other languages and you figure, oh my God, are we in the United States or not? But, you know, people assimilate, they become part of the culture, and they really contribute a lot.
You know, the media, I think, helps out a lot if people from different cultures could go on and just express themselves and to know they're normal people and it's nothing to be afraid of. Like when you see the progression of the LGBT movement through the last 30 years, more and more on TV, I mean, it's always been a stereotype of a person that's gay and how they act and how they talk. When I watch cable TV now, they have people who are gay. They're just, you know, business people, or they're like, you know, celebrities, but they're not doing crazy things. They're not the extreme caricature of that group. Right. And once you see that, and even for myself, when I say, okay, this person's gay on television, they're running a business, it's just it has nothing to do with their lives other than like this aspect of their lives. If more and more immigrants are on television, a lot of times they're afraid to put themselves out there from the aspect of being immigrant because just the nausea, like they get. And so I think more we get that kind of word out there that it's like just regular people, you know, like people. It really comes down. I mean, for foreign policy purposes, we kind of demonize foreign nationals too because it's an excuse to, you know, build up our armaments and the military-industrial complex. But really, some regular person in China or India is the same as the regular person here. We're just trying to eat and have kids and just live life, you know. But the more I think we humanize people, the harder it's going to get to go to war. So
no, you're right. You're right. And now, I mean, these days, I know it personally. My wife, who was an examiner at immigration, is born in the Philippines and was a naturalized citizen. Our son was born in Canada. His wife is Indian, so my grandkids, I don't know what they check on the box, you know, like what race or nationality, and it's sort of like, you know, I'm playing with them and I think, like, who really cares? I mean, aren't we beyond that? I mean, like, it's like, oh, they're 50% Indian and 25% Filipino, but they're just American kids.
Yeah.
They can't speak any other language but English, and they're great students and nice kids, you know.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. Now, going back to another thing you said about how she felt when she goes to interviews, she feels nauseous, and that's one thing I have. Like, I have cases, marriage cases, NATS cases, naturalization, where I don't even need to go to the interview because I think it's a clean case. But just having the lawyer there is important, I think, and it's not that I want to like just take money for the sake of money, but it's like people get really nervous and sometimes they go and they say crazy things or they give wrong answers just because they're so nervous. Or the officer looks how nervous the person is, they think they're lying or something. But having my presence there really helps calm them down. It's more of a psychological function for a lot of these cases. When it's like a open and shut marriage case where it's like, no, 5 kids, there's just no way it could be fraud. But some people go there and they just start sweating and stuff. And the officer kind of, and they should be used to this by now, especially the ones that are more seasoned. But sometimes when someone's sweating, it can't answer a basic question. You're like, wait, what's going on? There's some fraud going on. So having just my presence there just calms things down. I was at an interview the other week, and I asked the officer, what do you think when a lawyer comes? So I went to a marriage interview that was just open and shut. The clients were just nervous they want me to come. And then she kept asking me, attorney or counsel, is there something you want to tell me? Or just because she's like, why are you here? Because it's open and shut. I was just sitting in the back, really just watching, not because there's no need for me to be there, but except for the clients just wanted it. And I was like, you know, clients just want to have me there just for the sake of having me. And like, Frank, to be honest, sometimes some officers are really, you know, interrogating, so just in case that happens, but it's rare. I know most officers here in District 23 are pretty kind people and stuff. And she told me, when she went to training, they told us if a lawyer's there, be very careful. That means there's some sort of fraud going on. But she said, as soon as I started practicing, I realized that's just not true at all. It's just some stuff they told us in the academy. And I was like, okay. And she was really seasoned. I mean, it was funny. So we went to the District 23 is the Los Angeles field office. They're downtown. They're in Los Angeles, so it was on the 8th floor. And but they're so busy in the main part, they sent us to the naturalization section. Mm-hmm. And the person before us, the officer didn't even leave the room to call the person's name. They just kept yelling like Gonzalez, Gonzalez, and no one could hear what they were saying. And I was like, what? You know, just open the door so they could hear you, or just walk out to see. Why do you have to say behind the door? And that kind of threw me off. I'm like, God, poor guy's gonna go to some officer who just won't even bother opening the door to say their name. But then the next person came, she walked all the way out, said name, then she apologized for misspelling the name. She was so kind, she was gracious, walked us in, just with a smile on her face. And I'm like, okay, like, you know, you don't have to attack everybody. If things come out during the interview that's wrong, then, you know, turn on the police officer face. But it was such a peaceful experience, and good to know their USCIS officers are human beings too, and they're, especially she was seasoned. when you get an officer who knows what they're doing, it makes the process so much better. And but right now they're hiring so many people to fill up places, and a lot of seasoned officers are leaving because they can't handle it anymore. That it's just down the line is a lot of problems in the next coming years how it's going. So going back to your progression, so you started private practice. How was it? You know, now I started my private practice and had the internet to market and stuff. How did you get started to get the clients rolling? I mean, you had a good name because you had experience. So you can always tell them, I've been in the government position.
Right.
It's a good selling point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was a good point. But it was definitely before the internet. I didn't have a web page when I started. I would look for speaking engagements. About once a week, I would talk to like professional groups, engineers, architects, whatever. You know.
How would you get these? How would you find the?
It's hard. Well, I'll tell you one thing I did that when I worked for the government, my boss, a guy named Steve Shalomson in citizenship, who became a judge later on, he was walking down the aisle asking, and it was all glass, so I could see him talking to each person, and they were all shaking their heads, and I thought, I wonder what he's asking them, and he wasn't asking me because I was pretty new at that time. And he said, there's a citizenship class at night in East LA, and we were trying to find somebody who'll go out and speak. They want to have an attorney there. And I said, so did you find somebody? And he said, no, nobody wanted. And I knew because, you know, I grew up around Pacoima area, and that they thought, East LA will have all these gang guys and I'll get killed or something. But, you know, I knew that gang guys would not hang out in an evening adult school. They just would not be there. So I said, I'll go. And he looks at me like, you just started here. What do you know? But fast forward, I started a program where we'd go out to 100 schools per year, classes, and I got to know all these people. So one place I went when I went into private practice is I would go and talk to these evening citizenship classes. Also, I got to know all the local congressional people, and they would have, when anything would change in the law, they would have something at the federal building right down the street here, and I'd talk to all the congressional reps. But the rest, I don't know. I was just getting on the phone and calling and trying to find these different groups, you know. But I did a lot with the LA school district and so on. And then I would also go and approach all the small ethnic newspapers. There was a Vietnamese paper, an Italian paper, and I'd just go and knock on the door, and they were like free papers they'd hand out, and I knew that the editor was probably like, oh my God, every week we gotta come up with articles. I'd said, I'll write you a weekly article for free about what's going on in immigration. They said, really, would you do that? So I was writing for a whole bunch of newspapers. So before the internet, it was mostly writing and speaking that brought in the client.
And they still work. I mean, like, these are techniques. You gotta it's just have to work, the legwork.
On Thursday this week, I'm speaking at UCLA. There's this Bruin professional group, and you're an ex-UCLA guy too, so it's like a networking group. And they invited me to speak about Trump and immigration because it's in the news all the time.
And what year was this when you started your own firm?
Well, it wasn't my firm. So back in the early 80s, it was Fragaman and this other firm, which was the one I joined, that went from being big New York firms to trying to be national firms. And Fragaman made it work, and the firm I worked for did not make it work. So later on in the late 80s, we sort of pulled away from the firm, and it became my firm instead of part of the national firm.
You went through a pivotal time in immigration history, which was the Amnesty Act during the 80s.
Yeah.
On a business side, how was it? Because I've talked to people during that time, and it was just crazy business. Like, was it that way, just constantly people coming in, signing people up, you had to make your staff huge all of a sudden to deal with it? Was it like that?
And I remember another thing that we did to bring in business, and that'll explain part of the amnesty is the thing. Immigration in the middle 80s, before the amnesty bill was passed, was conducting raids around LA in kind of a clockwise fashion. So they would do raids out in East LA, and they would do raids down in Corona, and then down in San Pedro, and so on. And I wrote this letter. I would read the LA Times, find out who they just raided that day, and I would say, myself and my partner, we're both ex-trial attorneys for the Immigration Service. I read that you got raided. You really need somebody with that experience to be able to get work permits for these people who got picked up during the raids, or your business is going to fall apart. And I would do that every day, mostly, never hear back from them. But there was one company in Santa Fe Springs who called me up, and I went down there and did a seminar for their employees. And we went down there that weekend, and about 12 of them signed up. And it was all, now what we call cancellation of removal was called suspension of deportation. So you had to be here 7 years, be of good moral character, and show that it would be extreme hardship to you or your family members if you got deported. So, and you'd get a work permit. So for the employer, it was great. Okay, we don't have to discharge Jose from the payroll because he still has a work permit. We had so many people that we weren't sure how their cases were going to come out, but then all of a sudden Reagan signs the immigration bill in 1986, and almost all these guys got amnesty. So, I felt really good because I thought, people are paying us money, we're defending them in court, but in the long run, are they going to get something or are they not? We didn't know, but the amnesty really, got hundreds of our clients' green cards.
And so how was it, because you ramp up for that because it's busy work, and then it kind of, after that goes down, do you have to downsize the firm, or how do you, because that's a huge momentum event.
We just kept growing and hiring, the Jay Siegel, who was the judge who got me the job, retired, and I didn't hire him, but the guy who was my boss, he said, Jay Siegel will be working for us. I go, And Mike Strauss, who's a judge in Connecticut, he worked for me, and we wrote an article about asylum and got on the cover of LA Lawyers magazine and stuff. I just, immigration is, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, you know it as well as I do. It's sort of a culture and a language onto its own. You can be doing, some lawyers are just doing deportation and family cases, other people are just doing EB-5 cases. We've always tried to do a mix of all of those. So if one, like right now, even though we represent like hundreds of employers around the country, I'm seeing that this deportation machine is really ramping up. So we're hiring more paralegals and lawyers because we're only a block away from the courts in LA. And we're seeing so many people who have employment cases or marriage cases that are being pushed into the deportation system. And because I have lawyers that are experts in each side of that, we're able to help them, I think, better than somebody who just does deportation, has never done an employment case in their life.
Both sides of it, it's key. Now, so you went that, and then the 90s came, and IRIRA came like 96 or something like that?
Yes.
IRIRA. How that hit you personally and your clients? What was the mood like when that happened?
Well, it was great because the employment-based immigration had only been like 54,000 a year, and that included the spouse and kids. So very few people, like less than 10% of the total people immigrating, were doing it based on their job skills. And then the Democrats and Republicans, something that you never hear about again, got together, passed this bill, and the first George Bush signed it, and it increased the number of employment-based immigrants from 54 to 140,000. Wow. So that was great for my employers. They just started piling all this business on ours because there's I do a lot of healthcare, and the two occupations that the U.S. Department of Labor has identified as shortage occupations, where you don't have to advertise the job to get the foreign-born person a green card, are registered nurses and physical therapists. So they're both health related.
Yeah.
After that passed, we started doing like 500 nurses a year
Wow.
for maybe 100 different hospitals. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was great for business. And I must say, I mean, even, you know, I totally realize I have a financial interest in this, but I really think that, I told my wife this, I said, you know, the minute she got citizenship, she applied for her 8 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, some of your brothers and sisters are wonderful people, and a couple of them are jerks, you know,
Yeah.
I would rather them stay in the Philippines and not come here. I think it would be a better system to get rid of things like the visa lottery, the brother-sister category, and maybe married kids after a certain age.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you're married, you have kids, you're 35 years old. If you have certain job skills that you can contribute to the American economy, I think you should come here. But just because you have a parent who is a U.S. citizen, I think that's kind of a too random way to bring people to
the
the
numbers of
US.
that category are huge too. So now you can understand that, especially if you increase employment based, that would be key. And maybe some more non-immigrant visa categories for workers to come to, expanding the H-1B to a certain extent. That's a controversial one, the H-1B. Some people just want to get rid of it.
And I think for things, I mean, you know, if you go in this neighborhood, you go to any restaurant, I know you're Iranian extraction, so I go to all the Iranian, I love Iranian food. But when I go in and I look at who's cooking it, mostly Mexican-American guys that are cooking it, and a lot of them are undocumented. I've always joked around with reporters who I've taken to show them this, that they should have something akin to the Academy Awards for cooks, you know, like best Iranian-American cook, best Italian cook, and probably all these guys who are Mexican-American will be getting these awards. And, you know, most of the people in the restaurant will, you know, be Iranian in the restaurant, and I'll be watching them, and they'll be, love this food, so good. So they're doing a good job.
Exactly, yeah.
I think the economy and the immigration laws need to match up, and they're not matching up right now. So there needs to be some visas for these people.
Even like I've talked to CBP at the CBP meeting they had, and just the modern economy with people traveling and what is unauthorized employment, what isn't. If someone comes here for a short gig and stuff, should really go get a full O1 visa for something that's a day. It's kind of too harsh with the movement of people and how work is online, all that kind of stuff. And so it's just, updating it is necessary, but one is just how you're going to write the updates out, because, you know, one word wrong in a statute could mean a million different things as we see. And also then we have all these different people with different interests coming in to change it. And who knows, it's kind of, again, the devil, you know, what's going to happen if they try to change some stuff and make it much worse and stuff. One thing that was neat from IRA was the INA 245K that was included. And once I discovered that, I'm like, oh, wow, there's like that's a huge little exception that was really beneficial to a lot of cases when I learned about it. But on the other hand, you didn't have the waiver system that was created there, which was really harsh too. And I could, you know, when you break the laws, I understand that as well. But it's always this mixed bag, and you never know who the winners and losers are. But how vehemently against immigrants the current administration is, I kept thinking, you know, it's all rhetoric, it can't be that bad. But then when you actually see what's going on, it's like some of the stuff, just the unnecessary denials, RFEs, because you have good case and it gets an RFE, you're like, come on, like I understand the ones that, you know, on the line, but when I'm constantly getting RFEs, like for example on affidavit supports, when it's like a guy makes $500,000 a year, like you want an employer letter, like we have this pay stub W2, so how much more do you want? The guy's a doctor who has, like, when I see that kind of stuff, that adds so much more unnecessary time to the case, and that really like frustrates me, because right now just getting an EAD is taking like 6 months at least. It's like people just sitting here without a work permit. It shouldn't take more than 2 months like it used to. That kind of stuff is just really frustrating when you see that happen. So 90s went along, and you're one of the forefathers, one of the first people that got involved with internet marketing or social media marketing, if you will. How did you always had a good keen sense of business when you're speaking to people. Your father was in the government, you said.
Yes.
How did you feel comfortable with business and stuff? I've seen a lot of people it really just comes down to family. They've seen people in business and marketing and branding and stuff like that. How did you feel comfortable with doing that?
Yeah, I was from like a very lower middle class family. My mom was a stay-at-home housewife. My dad was a government employee, but he wasn't, making a lot of money or anything. In fact, my dad, when he was a teenager, his uncle, it was during the Depression, and his uncle had a barber shop. So he the first, oh my God, like 25 years, he worked for the government Monday through Friday and would get like gig jobs in barber shops every Saturday. And that's what paid for my clarinet lessons. And I thought, wow, my dad, he's really a worker. I mean, but for me, I had paper route when I was 6. When I was in high school, even though I wasn't a great clarinet player, I tutored, I gave music lessons. Yeah. And to get into UCLA, you had to have 1 year of algebra, 1 year of geometry. And a lot of the young girls, they, at that time, they were just told like, oh, girls are not good in math. Yeah. Which was totally untrue, but they accepted that, a lot of them. Yeah. So they would be sort of afraid to answer questions. So 90% of my students that I'd go to their home and tutor were young women who were having trouble with algebra and geometry. And I found if I just backed them up to the point, it's kind of a road, the week 1 you have to understand all that to get to week 2 to get to week 3. So I would just back them up to where it was that they didn't understand. And I'd say, hey, there's nobody here except you and me. You can ask me whatever question about it is. And they clearly were just as smart as the guys in math. They just were afraid to ask questions. And so they all passed algebra and geometry after we had the tutoring. And so I had so many businesses that I was running all these little things that I think it just gave me a sense of how businesses work. So I mean, I thought, wow, the internet. It was actually Jay Siegel again, the judge who first got me the job. He used to buy the New York Times every day, and this was like 1994 or something like that. And after lunch, he was finished with the Times. We'd have lunch together, and he'd just hand me the Times, and I'd take it home and read it. And I read about these guys at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign who were going to come up with something, and I knew it wasn't going to work, but it was something that you'd have in your hand. It was called a mouse, and you'd click on it, and then up on the computer screen would be icons, and you'd click on one, and then it would open up, and you could have a web page on, wrestling or immigration. I thought, oh my God, you could have one. But I thought, oh, they're going to charge people $100,000 to have all this info. And then the next year it came out and it said, oh, it's called Netscape and it's free. And I was like totally taken aback. So in '95, I started a website. It was just a bunch of articles, like 80 articles that I had written for ethnic newspapers. Yeah. And a friend of mine who I took the bus to downtown with, and he put them all together on a website. It looked like hell, but it had a lot of information, and I thought, boy, if anybody if this would be good for any particular area, it would be good for immigration, because somebody in any country could take that mouse that I thought wouldn't work, click a website that an immigration attorney did, and get the same knowledge that I used to give by speaking to 30 people at once at a high school. So now, we're using social media. I do YouTube videos that I embed into my page, and we've a few years ago, when we hit our first 1 million views, a bunch of reporters came and called me. They're like, wow, you got 1 million views. And I said, hey, it took me 7 years. Lady Gaga can do that in 7 minutes. I said, for like a boring guy talking about immigration law in a suit and tie, it's probably pretty amazing to get 1 million people watching something like that. And now we're up to about 2.4 million. and it's just a great way to be able to spread this knowledge. So to me, it's a win-win. I expect that 99% of the people who watch my videos, who subscribe to we have a monthly email newsletter and so on. I have a blog, the whole bit. But I expect 99% of those people, a lot of whom are other immigration lawyers too, but 99% will never become my clients. And that's fine, because we've got like tens of thousands of people that are looking at this page every week. I couldn't handle tens of thousands, but if 10 of them became my clients this month, that would be a win-win. It would be great for our law firm, and the other 10,000 who read the stuff, just like that woman in Mexico City, who read the stuff on my page. That's great.
Solve the problems.
Go and run with it, And I've had a lot of people who I get an email from, and they'll say, I read this thing on your page in 1998 or something like that, and I got a green card because of it in 2001.
Wonderful.
I never used you, I never called you, I never met you, but I always wanted to say thanks for posting it, and it makes me feel really good.
I mean, you don't even know what effect you've had on society. I mean, it's been really big just because one piece of information changed your life. And so the internet really allows you to have a footprint that's so much wider than you'll ever know, and it's wonderful. So one thing that does happen is your website is Shusterman.com?
Yes, it is.
Once you develop the firm, have more and more people, you're so associated with the brand. How difficult has it been when someone calls you, they want you to be the lawyer?
Yeah.
And what is, because I made my firm JQK Law, and I'm a full solo, but I'm like, if I hire people, how do I detach them and let them know the associates could do it too? Has that been a problem?
Yeah, that is a problem. I mean, I probably should have called it immigrationlaw.com or something like that. And I really did not make definite plans for making my associates into partners and so on, because we were just so busy on the day-to-day work, and I was so focused in on that. But I think, at this point, when I've been doing it for over 40 years, and I only come into the office a couple of days a week, and I hand the cases to the different lawyers in my, if it's an employment case, it goes to this lawyer, EB-5 goes to that lawyer, deportation to this lawyer. So I say, I have a whole office of experts, and I'm the dilettante. I know a little about everything, but I have to explain that to people, because they go, oh no, I want you to come in on the interview. And that, the case I told you in Chicago and San Francisco, I was there because they wanted me to go into the interview, but it was really other attorneys who prepared that whole case. It wasn't me.
Exactly. One thing I did, I branded myself the John Q. Khosravi Law Firm. I made it JQK now, just the initials, for planning, because I realized people, especially on videos, they see you, they hear your name, they're like, well, I want the guy who's I see,
Yeah, bring in partners. That's my advice. I wish somebody would have told me that when I was in my 40s or 50s.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, there's some firms right now who partners from 1950, it kept the names because the brand is there too. So it's like, especially when you get large and large, I think it happens more in corporate firms when people are less attached to the person. But immigration is so personal. It's like the actual client that's dealing with the issue wants to talk to you, as opposed to a corporation where it's the HR, and to them it's interchangeable and just want someone to do the work. Yeah, but it's so personal, the work we do.
I mean, in our newsletter, once a month we'll have a success story, and my lawyers are so busy, they're like, when I ask them, they're kind of backing away, like, oh God, I have so many cases I'm working on. But I said, look, you have to think about the future. I want to put your picture and have them make a consultation with you instead of with me. Because this web page is not about me looking like I'm some kind of god of immigration. It's about our whole firm and educating people. But sometimes it's difficult to.
I found a lot of lawyers or technicians just want to do the work. They don't think about the broader business entrepreneurial aspect of it.
That's true.
It goes hand in hand. If anything, the entrepreneurial aspect is first, then unfortunately, the practice of law, because unless you get them in the door to talk with you and trust you to hire you, you could be the best lawyer. It doesn't make any difference at all.
That's true.
And they don't teach that in law school, and a lot of lawyers just go into it thinking, I want to practice law, but you got to have a business mindset, or else you're not going anywhere.
That's true.
Even as an employee, if you can't bring in cases, your salary is going to stagnate. I mean, inevitably, I'm not saying your firm, but just firms. If you have one person that brings in a ton of work and is not a good attorney, but you have a good attorney that brings in no work, the partner is going to look at them differently, inevitably. That's just, it's not even in law, it's in every business, because you got to keep the door open.
We went about 3 years ago to an online scheduling system, and it was an idea of some 21-year-old guy at the front desk who's now in UCLA Law School. So people can make appointments, select the time, select the attorney, pay the fee, attach documents, all online. And the ones that I do, it comes to me at my home. So even if I'm not there, I'm sitting there on the computer and strategizing about their case. But the big thing that it did, we were doing about 500 consultations a year. And when we started with that system, we went up to 600. But the biggest thing, I was doing about 450, about 90%. And mine actually went down because I listed the other attorneys with their specialties above me.
Wonderful, yeah.
So I went down from 450 to 400, and the other attorneys went up in a single year from 50 consults to 200 a year. So I found that at least that gave some balance.
Yeah. And that's the direction it really has to go. Less of you deal with the day-to-day, especially where you're at. I mean, I'm still starting in relative to how well you develop your firm, but getting people, the stars, to stand out and become managers in that sense and really do it. But it's the business aspect is so interesting. It's like fast-moving, there's personalities to deal with, and so you've had a firm for 30 years now?
Yeah, over 30 years.
Over 30 years.
Hard
so
to believe.
So like, what kind of stuff is on your mind when you think about immigration? I mean, talk about immigration reform, the ideas you have of the family category shifting to employment and all that, diversity visa being shifted away. What are the stuff that's on your mind when it comes to immigration when you see it in the news? And there's the personal stuff of just getting kind of sad and offended about what's going on, but just as an attorney, what kind of stuff do you think about?
Well, I think that, and this has always been my opinion about it, even before the present administration, but we really, if you're going to have a realistic system, the economic aspects, like I said about like the Mexican-American chefs in the Iranian restaurant, and the immigration law have to match up together. Otherwise, you can have great ideas, but it becomes like that. I always compare it to prohibition. It's like, I drink, but I'm not a big drinker or anything like that. And I don't want there to be tons of drunk drivers on the road. So, but on the other hand, if we just say, oh, we're going to ban liquor and nobody's going to be able to drink it. Well, they tried that in the 20s. And all it did was create the mafia, people smuggling, and not across the Mexican, but across the Canadian border. They were smuggling.
And President Kennedy's father was.
Exactly. And so, it turned out to be a disaster, and about 10 years later, they got rid of prohibition.
After so much bloodshed and creating so many federal agencies and police forces and all this kind of
we
stuff,
still have those mafia guys that were created then. So I think...
with immigration, it's the same thing. The smugglers, like all the drug cartels have a smuggling arm to them that smuggle people with their drugs and stuff. And so it's just, prohibition is just not a smart thing in any format. Life is more complicated than means of black and white.
Right. If you see these people and the president's included, come on, he hired so many foreign workers on different visa categories, and a lot of them who had no papers at all. And, I've talked to hundreds of business people, and, you can't even walk around LA. I always kid my wife, 'cause we live in West LA in kind of a nice neighborhood. And I said, isn't it nice? It's so ethnically diverse. There's like so many Hispanics in our neighborhood. We see them cutting their lawns, pushing the babies down the street. And it's kind of a joke because they're the gardeners and they're the people who are the nannies, taking care of the babies. And, you know, the average person thinks, whatever, I'm not getting involved in this whole immigration thing, but I want a good person. I want Maria to take good care of my kids, because I heard from, you know, Blanche, my friend, that she took great care of their kids. But Maria has no papers, you know, and you really need a system that makes it possible for Maria to have papers, and for Blanche, or for whatever her name is, to hire Maria in a legal way. And if you're just going to say, oh, we're going to deport all these people, you're kidding yourself. It's just not going to happen. When my grandparents came, all you had to do was show up, and you got to be in the U.S. Now we have a system that's very regimented, and a lot of people who can contribute to the U.S., there's just no way for them. We had a case that went to the Supreme Court. It was under something called the Child Status Protection Act, and the Catholic Church, they have like a legal arm, and they did a brief for us. And then the 2B category for adult unmarried kids of a permanent resident, on paper it looks like, oh, it might take 20 years, but if you look at the backlog, it's 115 years to get a green card through that category if you're from Mexico. So I totally understand that people who are not like familiar with all these numbers, they'll say, well, I have nothing against Mexicans. They should just do it legally.
Get in line, like just
get in line. But you know, until people they invent some kind of drug that we can all live 115 years and not get married for those 115 years, there really is no legal way for a lot of these people. So I think the laws need to be changed so it conforms with the economic reality. Otherwise, this problem is just going to go on and on forever.
You know, like a nanny who's here, say unlawfully, that's taking care of kids, that's such an important, sensitive part of, one of the most important parts of your life. It's like the person that's taking care of your kid. If that person is worried about, you know, status and stuff like that, you know, that goes on the kids. And so many families here, because of the way childcare is and all that, they hire someone nanny like that, and so it's like those parents should also keep this all in mind. That affects their lives and study on it. It's just immigration is hard, complicated, boring. It's just people like, I mean, I find it exciting. You find it exciting,
I do.
But the typical population, they hear, they're just like, I want to watch something fun on YouTube. I don't want to get into this, but it affects everyone's lives, you know. And so you got to grasp and that's why I'm trying to do a lot of things I do online and stuff. Is try to explain to people and make it less complicated. Make it less complicated to show how complicated that it is. There's no line that you can go to.
I always listen to your podcast.
Thank you.
You do a very good job of that.
I appreciate that,
But a lot of people, they just don't understand that all of us are benefiting from the illegal labor, you know, when we get our car washed, when we eat in the restaurant, when we buy stuff at the grocery store. Who picked these crops, you know? And we're getting these things at lower prices and so on. If they actually carried out all of the administration's so-called wishes and there were no more undocumented people, then people would start complaining about the prices of all these goods.
The whole sectors would crash potentially,
Yeah.
Agriculture in California would just die off.
There was a thing that I listened to on NPR after the current president got elected, and there was a guy who was one of the biggest farm owners near Fresno and so on, and they said, well, you're a big Trump supporter, but wouldn't you say like 75% of your workers are undocumented? And he'd say, he just laughed. He goes, oh no, more like 100%. I couldn't believe it. And they said, well, then why are you for him? And he said, well, because he just wants to get rid of the bad hombres. My guys are really good people. And I get that all the time. People will come in with a Mexican nanny or maid or something like that and say, Maria, she's fantastic. How can I get her a green card? And I'd say, well, there's no way you can get her a green card.
I pay my taxes. I haven't done any criminal stuff. Like that doesn't no bearing.
But the same guy who is attached to Maria will look at me and say, well, then how do all those Mexicans get here? And I go, oh my God. that says it all. You know, people are coming here to better their lives, better their kids' lives, to make money. I totally understand that. But if we have totally unrealistic immigration laws, then there's always going to be tons of undocumented people working.
And you create like almost a criminal class that's always under, scared of moving around. There's a lot of abuse that happens in that community, and it goes against our higher ideals of being a place of freedom, of respect, of due process. We have a second-class citizenry, almost like ancient Athens, or not Athens, is it Sparta, where they had like the people that would do the work, and then they had the warrior class that would just go and call them every once in a while and do whatever they want. You can't have two-system society. That's like how old world was, when you have the rich and then the brokes and then the poor people, and we can't. I think as that grows, and it's not just the illegal immigrant community, it's more and more as our society is kind of breaking down class-wise, more and more people are becoming really rich and broke. This having two strata society that's so bifurcated, it's really dangerous, and that's the kind of stuff that leads to like civil war and riots and stuff. And it's an extreme thing to say, but I mean, it could happen down the line. We could continue with this this breakdown of our strata. I mean, luckily we're lawyers and we do good business and stuff, and we're keeping our heads above that. But a lot of lawyers right now are struggling with student debt, and they're barely keeping themselves above water. So even they're getting sucked down into that lower strata society. And it's hard. I mean, you said you were part of the lower middle class. You had the opportunity to grow and do stuff.
Absolutely.
That kind of stuff, it's harder nowadays. If you're in high school right now, you gotta. I mean, if you're really sharp and you know how to use the internet and learn the skill, the world's your oyster. You can do whatever you want. But it's not as easy to pull yourself up like that nowadays. The system, and it's really working against you. Interest rates are zero. You can't. Saving money doesn't make any sense. The government's regulations are all over the place. If you hire somebody, there's just so much taxes and stuff you have to do just to hire somebody or fire somebody that it just makes it hard for young people to get picked up. So it's like it's a crazy world we're going into. And one aspect, the major of it, is just the immigration issue. How to streamline this, just make it make more sense. Because you said so many of the new businesses, probably most businesses, it seems, are either immigrants doing it or the children of immigrants, because they have this different aspect, because they have to prove themselves. Things aren't just handed to them when they come here. They have to make it. So it's just, they really have to hustle to do it, and that creates a booming economy. Not to say people are born here, raised here, don't do that, but it just historically, immigrants do that because they have to. And that the greatest push towards evolution is being forced into evolution. Comfort doesn't lead to success and growth.
Look, I'm born in LA. I'll die in LA. I can totally understand that. I don't feel I'd be one of those people who would take a risk to move to another country where I couldn't speak the language and try to settle in and see how life would work. And I always talk to my wife about it, because she's from Philippines and so on. And I think into a certain degree, the immigrants who come to the U.S. are self-selecting.
Yeah, exactly.
The people who just want to, drink a beer and sit around and they'll probably just stay where they are, like I've stayed where I am. But the people who want to, I want to explore new things, start new things, I have so many. We do a lot of E2 visas, which are treaty investors. Mm-hmm. So you get together, let's say $100,000. Start any kind of business. It could be a restaurant, it could be a nail shop, whatever. Hire a couple Americans, and you're from one of 60 different countries where the U.S. has a treaty with. Boom, you have a visa that you can stay here for the rest of your life. You never even have to get a green card.
Yeah.
But I think those people, and we represent a few hundred of them, are kind of self-selecting.
Exactly. Yeah. To really get the cream of the crop, I say, I talk about this a lot, it's almost as we have all this money we have for aircraft carriers and stuff. The best thing we do is you drain the top talent of other countries, whether it's investors, business people, educated people, all to come here, which really puts us at a comparative advantage to other countries. So immigration is really a diplomatic tool, a military tool even, to get the best and brightest minds. The Rand Corporation did a study, and they said one of the best things we can do is keep sucking out the brains out of Russia if we're going to be competing with Russia, instead of just having these hot wars or like this talk that we have. We keep taking their PhDs, and when all the PhDs are here, it's going to make it harder for them to develop. And that's something we do. Even when you look at the Mexican border, people from South America coming, a person who runs across that border and comes here with the hellish life they have to go through, they're some tough people, and they could go through a lot here. So it's like, we're going to two of my paralegals who have been with me over 20 years,
were refugees from El Salvador who came over.
That's tough, yeah.
And I remember I talk to Elsa all the time. I mean, she's so smart. She can remember the facts of a case that we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, if I would have been from El Salvador and you would have been from LA, I'd be working for you. I know that's the only reason you're a paralegal and I'm the boss of this law firm, because she is super smart.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an exception. I think there's so many people like her.
Just the language issue alone. Come to a place where everyone speaks different language, has a different skin tone than you. You know you're going to be looked down upon. There's just so many hurdles that psychologically you have to overcome just to do it. Like you mentioned, I want to talk about that more, but it's so unrelated to immigration. When you said women kept being told that women aren't good at math, so it just became a self-fulfilling prophecy. To break through that psychologically, to say, no, I'm different and I'm going to fight that, it takes so much willpower and mindfulness to do that, and it's so hard. So the people who do overcome that, it's just these are really special people. I have to respect more than anything, rather than treat them like criminals. So Carl, if you want to reach out to talk with you, what are your social media? How do they reach out to you?
Well, they can look at my last name, Shusterman. Hard to spell, but that our website is shusterman.com. We have videos, like I said, they're mostly embedded into our webpage, but you can go on the YouTube and we have a channel of all our 80-something videos. Immigration is just changing so much, especially under this administration. I mean, I wake up every day and I just put immigration news and see, and then I usually take that story and I put it on. We have a breaking news part of our website. So we have a free email newsletter that we've had for about 25 years, and we have about 60,000 subscribers. And as I always tell people, it's definitely worth the money. It's free.
But Carl, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, John. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you as well. I guess we'll call that till next time. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye.